Hello, thank you for tuning into the Sports Heaven podcast. This week we will be focusing on the MLB Preview. This week we have Joel with us.
Hello.
And my name is Tyler. I'll be your host. So let's start with our first topic. We will be discussing the Chicago Cubs season. Now, they have a lot of prospects to be brought up. No one's bigger than Chris Bryant, who's actually going to be starting in the minors. So what do you think of the Cubs' decision to keep him in the minors to begin the season, Joel?
It's a little tough to argue against it the way he hit the spring training, but he really, of like all their big prospects, he's one of the few who has not actually played an MLB game yet. So they really aren't sure how his talent will cross over. So I kind of like this decision right now. The Cubs roster is, you look up and down their infield, and it's really average besides Anthony Rizzo and Starlin Castro. So they've got a hole at third base with Mike Holt, and you got to think he'll be gone by May or June,
Yeah, Mike Holt hasn't exactly been a long-term caliber third baseman, where Chris Bryant can be a superstar in the MLB. I don't know necessarily Chris Bryant's skills keeping him away from Major League Baseball, the big leagues, rather than a business decision, just keeping them down so they can get another year of control on him in the future, which a lot of people are not happy with right now.
That is true. I believe I think there's a certain deadline every season where if you bring prospects up after that deadline, they gain another year. I forget how it works in their contracts, but the team gets to own them for a little bit longer. So maybe you're right. This might just be a business decision by the Cubs, and what if Bryant starts hitting? Then people won't care.
Exactly. I'm not so sure the Cubs are gonna go all out. For this season, they have a lot of young prospects that are going to be able to keep them in contention for a long time. So one season's not gonna matter too much to them, which is kind of why I think they're looking to the long term and keeping Chris Bryant into the minors. Another, what I would say, strength of the Cubs this season is hopefully going to be their starting pitching, headlined by John Lester, who they signed in free agency. So what do you think how do you think the starting pitching is going to perform this season?
Well, I really like John Lester on this team. I think he provides them with a sure ace that they've been missing for a decent amount of time. I'm not sure you could say their last ace was. You could argue Carlos Zambrano for a couple of years, but he kind of went down all at the end. Jeff Samardzija only got good in his last couple seasons with the Cubs, but John Lester is the proven starter. He might be the only proven starter on this team, and you pretty much know what you're going to get from him. As long as the Cubs are able to make the outs for him, I think he'll be okay. Because he's definitely going to strike out a lot of people, but he's going to need help from his defense. And this is a bit of a shaky defensive team. You got to look at, like we said, third base and second. Just a lot of questions there. But I think Lester will help this team a lot.
I agree. I think he's going to bring a lot of leadership to the pitching staff, who's also has Jake Arrieta and Jason Hamels, which those two were a little shaky at the end of last season, but are hopefully going to be able to turn it around for the Cubs this season. But I
like Arrieta and Hamels, though. When they both were with the Cubs, obviously Jason Hamels fell off once he was traded to the Athletics. But you could really argue he had a really solid season with the Cubs. But Arrieta, you haven't really seen seasons like last season from him before. So it'd be really interesting to see if he can continue that.
Oh, I agree completely. It's just it's going to be a real wild card for the Cubs, this pitching staff. But they do have the potential to be one of the best in the National League. The other thing about the roster is they do have a lot of young players. They don't have a lot of leadership. They went out in free agency and got Dexter Fowler, who kind of solidifies the outfield a little bit, gives them some leadership, and it's just going to be a really young core. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle the ups and downs of a 162 game season.
Absolutely, I'm really questioning how Jorge Soler will do. He's another guy they expect a lot out of him. But he largely disappointed last season. I know he was only 89 at-bats, but it's just he had a decent average, 292. But I feel like they can get a little bit more from him. I shouldn't have said disappointing, but it's kind of I think he's got more to go. He's got more to show, and I think we'll see some of that this season. But, like we mentioned, they got a lot of young prospects on this team for sure. Whenever Chris Bryant comes up, he's going to make the difference. Javier Baez, obviously, his average has always been a problem, but he has got a lot of power. And if they figure a way to work him into the lineup, I think he makes an immediate difference for this team. And then it's Addison Russell at shortstop, who's his role, we're not really sure how it's going to work out. We don't really know his future with the Cubs, with Starlin Castro being the current shortstop. But, I mean, from what all signs indicate, he's a great defender, probably a better defender than Castro, and he's definitely got a heck of a bat to go with it. But it's 324 average this spring.
Yeah, it was very puzzling when the Cubs traded for him last season with that trade with the A's to get rid of Hamels and Samardzija. I feel like there's two possibilities. One, you could always put Castro over at second. He definitely has the ability to play second. That would make him a little bit more better defensively. He can hit just like another second baseman would. Or there's also been rumors that Starlin Castro is on the trade block. That's been going on for maybe 2 years or so. The Cubs can do either one. They could definitely shore up their other positions by trading them, but they're looking. Starlin Castro is going to be a special player, I think.
Oh, it's really tough to say. You mentioned Castro going to second, but then what about Javier Baez?
Exactly.
But it's like I've heard rumors that Castro could play in the outfield, and I've heard rumors he could be traded for pitching. But what I think is going to happen is this team is going to make a decision on him or their prospects based on the team's needs throughout the season. If the rotation is struggling, someone will be traded for a pitcher. If the outfielders aren't hitting, someone on Castro might get moved out there. I honestly think that Baez, Bryant, and Russell will all be starting by the end of the season. So I don't know where Castro fits into that, and because since he's got more experience, he's going to be doing more money. It's likely he could be on his way out. But I don't know, the Cubs have the money. At the same time, they have the money to spend it. So if they can find a place to fit him in on the team, I think they'll keep him. But the thing is, if they need pitching, expect him to go immediately.
Yeah, I do like the idea of moving Starlin Castro to the outfield. The outfield does look fairly weak right now, where they could use a little bit of an upgrade. But a team's going to be willing to pay big for him, for Starlin Castro at the deadline per se, to see what else they can shore up. Moving leagues, let's talk about the Cleveland Indians over in the AL. This team has a big potential to jump up in their division, with the Tigers and the Royals both diminishing a little bit. A big question mark is going to be Corey Kluber, and to see if he can retake the Cy Young this year.
Yeah, definitely a lot of questions there. I mean, he had a heck of a season, but I don't really see him doing quite the same as last year. He had some absolutely nasty pitches. And based on, look at his career, he wasn't really figured. He was nothing big until this past season. But, I expect some regression, but at the same time, I see him, still being a very effective starter on his team. I don't know if he'll put up ace numbers again, but expect him to make quite a difference. Then you look at the rest of this rotation, it might be one of the most solid ones around in baseball. I could argue this is probably the best one. You have Carlos Carrasco, Trevor Bauer, T.J. House, and Zach McAllister. Obviously, as you get to the bottom, it's going to decrease in talent. But you got to look at T.J. House and Zach McAllister. They both had very solid second halves last season. McAllister, his numbers in his numbers at the end of the last season were very, very impressive. You look at his September ERA of 2.84. That's really impressive after a couple of real bad months. They need to find more. He needs to find consistency. House is looking for consistency. And, Trevor Bauer, you've seen his numbers get better over the last couple of years. He was drafted, I believe, third overall a few years ago. He's really looking to get a better control of his pitches. And once he harnesses those, I really think he's going to be a more dominant pitcher. I think he could be the best of all five of these guys.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Joel. I think the big thing's going to be is Kluber reproducing the season he had last year. He pitched almost 60% more innings last season. It was his first big breakout season. If he can go out there and produce what he did last year, the Indians have a real shot at winning the division. They really need that one starter to go out there every 5 days and just throw a solid game, give them the opportunity to win no matter what.
Absolutely. I think you have him and Carlos Carrasco, two of the best 1-2 punches in the AL in a league with plenty of good pitching. I think Carrasco had 140 strikeouts last year. That went largely unnoticed because he was playing with Kluber. But his 8-7 record obviously wasn't very impressive. But that doesn't even matter when you've got a 2.55 ERA. It's just they'd like to get a little bit more innings out of him. He had 134. That could have been a little bit better. You look at Kluber, he had plenty more. So it's just, if those two right there can get beat up a ton of innings, that's huge. That's what pitchers are all about. Yeah, you got to have a starting pitcher in there. You know, a lot of innings more than anything else.
Yeah, the eating innings is a key to going to the playoffs and producing well. Kluber, this last season was the first time Kluber threw over 200 innings, so it'll be interesting to see if he can reproduce that and throw another 200 inning season and still produce the same amount of numbers. And another thing with the Cleveland Indians would be their offense. It wasn't great last season. Definitely Nick Swisher produced undervalued to what they thought they were going to. So where do you think they can pick up a little bit of extra production?
Well, I mean, you look at some of the moves they made. They picked up Brandon Moss. He adds plenty of power to this team. I mean, he's going to strike out a lot. You know that. You got to really hope for a healthy Michael Bourne. They missed him a lot last season. I kind of shuffled the whole lineup around. So getting some more consistency out of him is very important. There's some spots on this team where you kind of wonder what you're going to get. I mean, Carlos Santana, he's been very inconsistent. He can play. I mean, he could play almost anywhere in the infield besides second and short. He can catch. You know, he'll DH. He's very versatile, but they need a little bit more consistency from him. Swisher, I think he's pretty much washed up. I hate saying that. He's had a lot of successful years, but I think he's at the end, and they need to find a way to get rid of him fast. However, I do like this team a lot all around, and frankly, I would not be surprised if they win the division. I think if they stay healthy and they hit well, the team wins. Jason Kipnis will bounce back this year, I believe. I mean, Chisenhall's a very underrated third baseman. It's a real solid team all around. I think the pitching is the biggest part, though.
Yeah, the Cleveland Indians have a very good shot at winning their division this season. Well, let's stay in the AL Central, and let's look at the Kansas City Royals. And the season after they got to the World Series as a surprise team, they did lose a couple players, they did gain a couple players. It kind of looks like it evened out a little bit, but what do you think about their adds and subtractions?
Yeah, after spending all season wondering whether Alex Gordon could have hit an inside of the park home run or not, they really didn't do much. They'd lost a few players, but they didn't really gain much. Losing Billy Butler wasn't too big of a deal. He's at the end of his career. You kind of expected him to go. Mauricio Aoki is also gone. That's a little unfortunate, his on-base percentage. But they also lost James Shields. You can take that however you want, but I'd say with the current state of the rotation, that's a bad loss for them. Regardless of his performance in the playoffs, I think that's bad that they lost him. They're looking at Yordano Ventura to really lead this team. He threw 7 shutouts to force a Game 7 in the World Series last year, and as impressive as that was, his regular season was a bit on and off. But his postseason numbers showed that he could really be something special. So having him get that extra experience in his rookie season, I think that's good for him. But for the rest of the rotation, there's a lot of questions. You know, Danny Duffy, he had a solid season last year, but I mean that was one of his only real big seasons. Edinson Volquez has been known for his inconsistency in baseball, despite a very solid season last year. And then you just look to the bottom there, Jason Vargas and Jeremy Guthrie. It's like you kind of wonder how they still have jobs at times. It's just they're not very good, and I don't think they should be on the team that just won the American League.
Yeah, I definitely agree that James Shields is going to be the biggest loss for the Royals. He was the anchor of that pitching staff, the leader. But Edinson Volquez coming in, he's definitely not going to be able to replace James Shields. But if he's able to do what he did last season with the Pirates, he had a mid 3 ERA. He's not going to be able to be the leader, but he's going to be able to give the Royals some innings and hopefully put them in positions to win some ball games. I do like the addition of Alex Rios though for the Royals. Rios was a really big name a couple of years ago. He's going to be able to replace Aoki. I'm sorry. He's going to be able to replace Aoki, give them some extra power in the lineup along with Kendry Morales. I think their lineup's definitely improved from last year, but the pitching staff took a step back.
Well, the thing I would argue with Alex Rios is there's not a ton of protection for him in the lineup. I think, you look at Moustakas, who's going to strike out a ton. Eric Hosmer will strike out a ton. It's just a lot of these guys here are not the power bats that Rios needs to be behind to do well. And he's definitely capable of more than just the 4 home runs he hit last season. For sure. That's pretty obvious.
Of course.
So, but the problem is I think his statistics will go worse on a team like this that doesn't score lots of runs. Hosmer has a ton of power. Perez does too. Alex Gordon is a very good hitter. But overall, you look at this team, I'm not really sold on him overall. I don't like the Kendrys Morales acquisition. I think he's old. I think he's washed up. I think his injuries have done enough to hurt him. I don't think he can make a difference in this league anymore. And I really wasn't sure what they were trying to do when they got him, you know?
Yeah, well, that's what they said about the Royals last year, was they weren't going to be able to compete for a World Series. They maybe would make the playoffs, and see what happened. They lost in the World Series against the Giants. The real thing that carried them to the World Series, however, was their bullpen, led by Greg Holland as their closer. Arguably the best bullpen in baseball. So do you think the bullpen's going to be enough to carry them through the season and hopefully get them back to the playoffs?
No, because the problem is the bullpen can't save them if their starters can't get to them first. You know, with those three, you look at Greg Holland, Wade Davis, Kelvin Herrera. Those three. You put those guys on any team, and it's very impressive. But the problem is, I don't think they're going to be able to get there enough more often than not. I don't see Edinson Volquez and Danny Duffy consistently getting into the sixth inning. You know, I definitely do not see Jason Vargas and Jeremy Guthrie getting there. So I think the bullpen is nice, but with this type of rotation, it just doesn't cut it. And honestly, I don't think the Royals will make the playoffs this season.
So your prediction: Royals do not make the playoffs, miss the wild card.
I would be stunned if they made it to the playoffs.
Do you think they would be over 500?
I think they'll be a winning team, but I don't know. I think the American League has improved way too much for the Royals to be able to get into the postseason. I think it's stronger than it was last season. The Royals did have that first wild card, but the problem is I don't think there's enough talent on this team. I think there's too much underachieving, and unless Moustakas goes out and surprises us, I don't think this team, scores a lot of runs.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think the Royals still might have a little bit of magic in them, get the second wild card, maybe lose in the first round, not get past the wild card division, but I still think they're going to be able to get that last wild card. So moving divisions, again, let's go back to the NL and talk about the big spenders in the offseason, the San Diego Padres. Man, did they acquire a lot of players. James Shields, Matt Kemp, Will Myers, Justin Upton, Will Millbrooks, and Derek Norris. Not all of these players are proven, but hopefully this is going to shore up their pitching staff and their lineup.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of change to this team. When you look all around, the outfield is completely new. The infield looks a little bit different just because of Millbrooks in there. It's obviously a new catcher in Derek Norris. They picked up James Shields, who we just talked about with the Royals, and they're expecting him to be their number one starter, but the problem is that role already belongs to Andrew Cashner. I think Cashner proved that last season. He was the lights out, especially to start the season. I think he should be the number one guy. The problem is beyond those two, I think it's just really shaky. There's not a lot of consistency. I mean, you look at Ian Kennedy, a guy who's been up and down his whole career. I'm not sold on that rotation past Shields and Cashner, but I think those two right there are pretty impressive. That along the way they'll find at least a number three guy for sure.
Oh, they're definitely their 1 and 2 pitches probably one of the best in the NL. But then that number 3 guy, Ian Kennedy, he's been up and down like you said. But the one thing he does do is he eats a lot of innings. He's probably he probably pitches one of the most amounts of innings in the NL. He might not have the ERA to show, but somebody that can just go out there, pitch 7 innings every 5 days is going to be really valuable to a team like the Padres.
That is true, and they're expecting Tyson Ross to do real well. I mean, since he joined the Padres, his ERA has not been above 3.17, which is very solid. But you look at that's only in 66 games pitched. So, it's his 2.81 ERA, obviously last season, very impressive, 31 games though. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. He did just short of 200 innings. I just think this whole rotation is unproven beyond Cashner and Shields. I'm kind of waiting to see who will really step up with maybe another good season, at least this year, to be at least a number 3 guy.
And let's move over to the outfield now. Like you said, they have a completely new outfield with Will Myers, Matt Kemp, and Justin Upton. Matt Kemp, the former MVP of the National League, who's kind of decreased in the last couple of years, not being able to put up as much production with the Dodgers. And then same with Will Myers, a really highly touted prospect who the last season or two hasn't really lived up to what the Rays thought they were going to get in him. So go ahead.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I don't know I don't know how we can say that about Myers. He won Rookie of the Year in 2013. I guess you could say 2014 was a little disappointing from him. but he only played 87 games at that same token, so it's going to be it's hard to really judge him a ton right now. And I was stunned that Rays gave up on him so soon. They must have seen something because they will not be able to afford him soon or something, but I was really surprised that they gave up on him so fast. I do think his power potential was a little bit lacking these past 2 seasons, and they expected that a lot more, so maybe they made the right decision and got rid of him. But I think Will Myers was a good pickup. I thought he was the best one that the Padres acquired, and I think they could have him in their outfit for a long time.
Yes,
the biggest thing are Kemp and Upton. You know, it's really tough to see what we're going to get from him. Matt Kemp, like we said, you know, he's been an MVP contender before. He's done almost everything you can but win a championship. He's had great numbers, but he hasn't been able to be healthy. But when he has been healthy, he hasn't really produced as well, or you know, he hasn't put up the same old numbers as before. So I don't know. They don't like his defense. The Dodgers didn't like his defense, so they probably got rid of him because of that. But it's just like, it's really questionable. There's a lot of questions between all three of them, especially like Myers and Upton. I mean, you know, these two, like Myers, he said he's won Rookie of the Year, but Justin Upton, you kind of look at his numbers, there's just a lot of inconsistency, especially when he joined the Braves. You know, he couldn't get his average up real high. And, I mean, you saw him hit home runs, strikeouts. You know, everything went up. He was couldn't get the ball in play.
Yeah, strikeouts will always kill a power hitter, just like Justin Upton. Another acquisition the San Diego Padres made was Will Middlebrooks from the Boston Red Sox. Middlebrooks was a very highly touted prospect with the Red Sox, but he has not been able to produce. It looks like the Red Sox kind of gave up on him with this trade. The San Diego Padres are hoping he can bounce back and become an everyday third baseman for them. Do you think Middlebrooks is going to be able to produce in San Diego?
Will Middlebrooks is kind of becoming one of those common MLB slugger now. He's going to strike out a lot. He's not going to hit for a high average. Boy, will he hit a lot of home runs. In his career, he only has 34 in 3 seasons. But keep in mind, he's never played more than 94 games in a season. I think Boston as often you hear the complaint about New York because media. You say the players feel a lot more pressure playing there. You know, in recent years, you could really argue that Boston's become very similar. There's just a lot of pressure before him. And I think Middlebrooks there wasn't really much of a chance for him to do much. You know, when he wasn't succeeding, he was quickly replaced, and then he was done with. I'm looking for him to be somewhere much quieter, like in terms of media coverage in San Diego. I'm looking for him to kind of go off. They're going to give him the opportunity to win the third base job, and it's tough to say how he'll do. But frankly, I think his average will stay low, but I expect his home runs to be way up.
Okay, well, what do you think for the Padres? Do you think they're going to be able to contend for a playoff spot?
I think they'll be up there, but when you look at their division, it's really tough to tell because this is, I don't know, the NL West is one of the most, I would say, confusing ones right now. You know what I'm talking about. Look at that whole division, which is the Dodgers. This might be their last year before they have to blow it up completely. But it's just I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about this outfield. I'm not sure how I feel about some of their infielders as well. I'm not sold on these acquisitions that they made. I think Kemp was good. I think Middlebrooks is going to be a good one. I like Derek Norris a lot. I'm really questioning Myers a lot though. So I see them right on the edge of the playoff picture. They're going to get in briefly, or they're barely going to miss out.
Yeah, the NL West is just a hard division, especially with the Dodgers. I'm not sure if the Giants are going to be all that much of a contender though this season, just because of every other year they're either great or down, and then if the trend continues, the Giants are going to be down this season. So the only real competition they're going to have is the Dodgers. So they have an opportunity, but I don't think they're going to be able to take advantage of it. Well, thank you very much. Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they definitely have a shot if the Giants kind of fall out of the picture, as many people are partially expecting them to. So, I mean, you have to look at other teams. I don't think the Padres can win this division, but I think it's possible they can nab a wild card, but it depends on how the NL East does, because many people expect the Mets to be able to jump in the playoffs, and then they're always competitive NL Central, and like any one of those teams could make the playoffs.
Okay, well, thank you very much for listening to the Sports Heaven MLB Preview Podcast. Make sure you join us for future podcasts, and thank you very much, Joel.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Appreciate it.
All right, bye-bye.